All right, evening everyone. Welcome to another Peaceful Solution Character Education Teacher Certification class. Please be seated if you're here with us in the auditorium. Thank you all for joining us who have been watching faithfully for many years. And also, if you haven't, or this is your first time, welcome. If you're watching and joining on Facebook, of course, you can use that drop-down menu. You can see should be pinned there. You can get the current book that we're in, which is the parenting manual, a hands-on approach to basically applying these characteristics that we've been learning here for quite a long time, but putting it in the environment of a parent. Whether you're a parent now or whether you're planning on being a parent, it's still beneficial to you because it's teaching the individual what their responsibilities and their requirements are to be able to parent effectively using the principles that are found in this character education program, but also how to train the child and to bring them up and so forth. All right, so we're going to be picking up where William left off here on page 63. Now, what I think we'll do is we'll just go back here to let's go back to lesson plan 8, page 8B. And look at the procedure here because we were in procedure 6. That's what he read last time, and we'll go ahead and read it again because we're still on page 63 and hopefully carry on to page 64 today. It says, read the section "It Starts With You" on page 63, then allow students to take the test on page 64. Encourage them to answer each scenario honestly. And this assignment is for each individual to evaluate just themselves. It's not to be shared with the class. Read the section "Analyzing Your Respect IQ" on page 65. Have students take note of their areas of concern. Encourage them to continue to strive to obtain a very important character trait, the very important character trait of respect for themselves and others. And of course, that's what this particular lesson that we're in is dealing with, entitled "Teaching Children About Respect," which is something that's, boy, I mean, that was a basic teaching growing up for most of us, to have respect. Of course, you want to have respect for yourself. I know it was really pushed to have respect for others, especially adults, teachers, and anybody who was in authority, whether it's other adults that weren't related to you, adults that were related to you, people in positions at school, law enforcement, and so forth. Our parents really pushed us being and showing respect for adults, not only in our conduct, but also in our words, too. When I was growing up, you couldn't answer an adult "what" or "huh" or anything like that. You had to say yes or "pardon me" or, make sure you said "thank you" and things like that. If you said "what" or "yeah," you get a, what was that? "Yeah." I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. "Yeah." "Yes." Because they didn't want you to be lazy. And it was just trying to instill, respect in the way we interacted. And as we went over in the Peaceful Solution in the respect unit, number 4, there are different levels of respect. You're going to have there's a general respect, but you're going to treat an adult differently than you're going to treat your buddy or pal. In other words, you're not going to talk to an adult the same way you would talk to your friends that you're hanging out with, right? And so we have to understand that, and it's important that not only should we instill that in our children, teaching them first and foremost to have respect for themselves, but we should role model that in front of them, right? And if you interact with another adult or maybe somebody who's you're checking out at the cash register and your child's with you, there's nothing wrong with you saying "yes ma'am" or "yes sir" or thank you very much, have a great day, because you're role modeling these things to your children. Get pulled over by the police officer, you don't break off into "what in the world you pull me over for? I know my rights. What is this? I've got you recorded right now. Got you." What are you teaching your children? Right? You want to show respect and be respectful to that person who's in authority, because you're the authority of your child, that police officer or sheriffs or state trooper or constable, whoever holds authority in their position over you in what they're doing. So you want to emulate that degree of respect in front of your child, because remember, like William was talking about last class, children, they are very observant, and they take to heart more what you do than what you say. They do hear what you say, but they are looking to see if you're going to practice what you say, what you tell them to do. Are you doing the same thing? So we have to always constantly, as teachers and parents, role models, we have to be on guard to make sure that we're practicing these things. Now, if we're studying and putting into application or applying the peaceful solution into our lives, practicing these things into our lives, and we've been doing it for a long period of time, where it's become a habit, then it's not something that we have to, fight to remember, right? Like you do when you learn something new for the first time, you have to really struggle to remember it, and you have to do it over and over and over, and you catch yourself because it's a new habit, a new skill that you're trying to learn and to develop. And a parent might be learning that with their child. I know they might make some mistakes, and they might fall short, and they might, show a little bit of anger, or might be disrespectful. Well, that would be the time for them to, kind of step back and point out to the child, the way that this was handled was not respectful, right? And they could even apologize to the person right there, who they showed that disrespect for, if they have the opportunity, or just explain to the child, what I displayed right there, that was not proper. This is how it should be handled. And again, that's also teaching the child. It's showing that you, as a parent, are humble enough to acknowledge when you made a bad choice or when you made a mistake, right? And that develops a greater degree of reverence for you in the child's eyes, because it's not like you have to be a flawless pillar in the eyes of your child. There's nothing wrong with always trying to set a perfect example in front of them, but it should just be a working example, right? You're showing that, hey, listen, even when you become an adult, you're going to make some mistakes. You're going to make some bad choices. This is how you fix it, okay? Because there's just going to be circumstances and things that might creep up on you, or whatever. You might not be thinking about something, or might have forgotten something. But showing them where they can get the knowledge and how they can apply the knowledge to fix a problem is just as important, okay? And that's our jobs as parents. And this is why we're in page 63 here, where it says it starts with you. And it says, so we're just back up here. We're really going to be picking up on the second paragraph there under there, but I just want to back up. It's not very far. And recap where William left off last class. It says, if we take a closer look at respect and how it applies to individuals, our community, and even our nation, we see that respect can be divided into four main categories. And then we have self-respect, which is the first thing we teach our children. That's the first lesson in the respect unit. Second lesson, when we talk about what respect is, and then having respect for ourselves and then for others. Respect for others, respect for possessions, yours and others, and respect for the environment. And you see a little box to the side there. It says opportunities to teach respect are all around you, from the Peaceful Solution. In the next paragraph, we read, every choice we make can be sorted into one or more of these four categories. For example, when you wake up in the morning and prepare for the day by bathing, grooming, and choosing clean, appropriate clothing, you are demonstrating self-respect. All right, and this is something that, kind of William talked about these things in this previous class, and why it's important to instill these values in your children. When I was growing up, and of course, what I try to instill in my children is before you go to bed, the previous night, get your things ready for the next day. That's how it was when I was going to school. That was a part of our responsibilities. Make your lunch. If you were taking a bag lunch, get your lunch ready. Get your book bag and everything ready, the things you're going to be needing in your book bag. Get your clothes set out for the next day, your pants and your shirt and socks or whatever you're going to be wearing. Have them nicely folded up in a place, not just balled up in the corner somewhere. Make sure you have everything ready. So when you get up in the morning, you're not running all over the place. What am I going to wear? Oh no, I didn't make breakfast, or I didn't make lunch, and now you're trying to slap peanut butter and jelly together and, get your crackers and stuff apples and everything in the bag. And now you're almost late, or possibly you missed the bus, right? And so this teaches a bit of self-respect, and setting and taking care of your clothes. First off, not just setting out your clothes the night before, the night before, but also teaching the children how to even launder their clothes. A lot of children, they think you just take your clothes and then throw them in the basket, and then they just magically appear in the drawer, clean and folded. I don't know how it is. I just put them in this basket, and next thing you know, they're in my drawers. In my chest of drawers in my dresser. But starting them off young, and obviously being very careful. Now it's hard to be unsafe with today's washers. Back in the day, we used to be able to open up the washer. I used to like to go down in the basement and open up the washer and stick my finger in the door switch and watch the washer spinning around, because I just like to watch the washer. Now, that's pretty dangerous. Now they have lid locks on washers. You can't open the lid because, probably children like me stuck their hand in there and got their arm broke, Before that, they had ringer washers. And the ringer washers, they were first manually operated, and then General Electric came out with an electric ringer washer. I think my parents still have one of those that I got from my grandma, and it was just a tub, and it just agitated. That's all it did. It just agitated for however long you wanted it on a timer, or you just turned it on and let it go. And to drain it, you had to take the hose and lay it down so that it would be gravity fed. And then you would take those clothes, and then on top of that, there was a ringer that had like these rubber rollers, and you would run your clothes through there, and it would squeeze the water out of there. Well, if you got your finger or something caught in there, it was gonna hurt pretty bad. They had a safety release on top that you can press, and it would open up the ringer in case you did, get your hand caught or something in there. But things are a lot safer now. But still, parents still taught their children these valuable lessons to show respect for your belongings. Take care of your clothes, wash your clothes, and hang them up to dry. Then after you take them off the line, which hopefully you don't leave them on the line for, 2 weeks to dry, and then 3 rainstorms come, and you're like, oh, that's just an extra rinse cycle, Mom. No, get your clothes off of the line, fold them up, iron them if you need to, right? That was another thing we were taught, how to iron. You be careful with the iron. I didn't have to put the iron on the campfire. We had a regular old electric iron, and put them away neatly and nicely. And this instills this value and respect. And then the children, they also start to have an appreciation for having a part in taking care of their clothing, right? They also have an appreciation for what their parents do and having to wash those clothes. And they realize, man, maybe I shouldn't be throwing my clothes in the hamper just because I tried something on and I didn't like that shirt or those pairs of pants. I actually could just hang it back up or fold it back and put it in the drawer, right? It doesn't mean it's dirty just because I tried it on, to see if I like it or not. So it starts to instill those values and that respect for themselves, but also for their belongings as well. And it even extends out further than that, because, to take care of your belongings, it requires, nowadays, it requires water, electricity, detergent, right? And even if you hang dry your clothes, you had to have, the clothesline, or, at least a clothesline. Maybe you hung it in between 2 trees or something if you didn't have a manufactured clothesline. So it requires something to get that clothesline up there. So, it helps to instill those values and appreciation for what it takes to take care of their belongings in their minds. All right, so it says here, for example, when you wake up in the morning, prepare for the day by bathing, grooming, and choosing clean, appropriate clothing, and are demonstrating self-respect. Also, make sure that your child also bathes, grooms himself, and chooses clean, proper clothing. When you do this, this teaches him to also have self-respect. You know, and and you have to kind of, when they're young, especially boys, you know, we just want to play and have a great time, and we could just go to bed after that and get up in the morning and do it all over again. And you know, your parents would have to instill, hey, it's bath time now. You know, you got to get in there and take a bath. And sometimes, you know, when they get old enough, you know, the door hasn't even fully closed, and they're already coming out, you know, saying that they've already taken a bath or taken a shower, and you're like, wait, what did you do? Did you do like dry cleaning or something? Because your hair's not even wet. How'd you wash up that fast? You know, you like set the world record for the fastest shower time, you know? So you get back in there and do it again. This time use some soap in that hair, you know? You still kind of smell a little bit like, you know, a pet gerbil, you know? So you got to kind of instill that value in them. And hopefully when they were younger, and there's a certain age, you know, where the parent doesn't have to deal with bathing the child anymore. When they're usually old enough to dress themselves, they should be old enough to bathe themselves. But you want to help them, you know, to understand how to do it properly, right? You know, to wash their hair and to get under their arms and to get their feet and all their areas clean so that they can really be fully clean, right? Sometimes they're a little bit afraid of the soap because the soap gets in the eyes and it burns their eyes, so they don't want to wash their hair and things like that. So you can, you know, help them in that way. Or there are some types of soaps that are better for sensitive, you know, children that don't really burn the eyes. No more tears or whatever. But you want to encourage them to do it properly. Let's see here. So, of course, this also shows them how to have self-respect. Simply reminding him to turn the water off while brushing his teeth teaches respect for the environment and encouraging him to make his bed or wash his breakfast dishes teaches respect for his belongings and yours. And it was kind of interesting because, you know, William talked about the brushing your teeth and leaving the water running. Now, I don't know if it's just some type of comforting sound just to have the water running while you're brushing your teeth, kind of like a waterfall or something like that, you know. But it can be a very poor habit to have because, you know, it is really wasteful. It is very wasteful just to leave the water running while you're brushing your teeth. You need a little bit of water, wet your toothbrush if that's what you do. Maybe rinse out your mouth beforehand, get the loose particles out, and then put your toothpaste on or whatever you're using. Brush your teeth, maybe add a little bit of water and keep everything nice and moist. And then you rinse your toothbrush out, spit your waste out, and rinse your mouth out, and that's it. You know, it shouldn't take probably more than maybe a half a cup to do that. But I looked up exactly how much is wasted every year because it's pretty interesting. It talks about, now this is individual waste from brushing teeth. It says each time brushing with water running, now this is with the water people just turn on the water and just let it run while they're brushing their teeth. Now, you know, according to the American Dental Association, I don't know if that's the name of the association, they say you should brush your teeth an average of like 2 minutes, I think, around 2 minutes. I don't know if anybody that brushes their teeth around 2 minutes, I don't really time it, but that's just the average. But most of the time it's around 1 minute. Brushing with water running wastes approximately, now I'm going to throw it out there. How much do you think it wastes for each time? Say again? 1 gallon? We got 1 gallon. We got 1 gallon. I got 2 gallons. No, I'm just joking. You said 1 gallon? Someone said 2? All right. No more takers? All right. 4 gallons. 4 gallons per session. Now, daily, which is average twice a day, right? Brush your teeth in the morning, brush your teeth in the evening before you go to bed. That's 8 gallons of wasted water per day. Annually, over a year, this adds up to over 2,400 gallons per person. Now, national waste. They say nearly 20% of adults admit, this is the ones that admit, to leaving the water running while brushing their teeth, according to American Water. This translates to around 149.9 million gallons of water wasted every day due to this habit, assuming now, first off, the other 80% weren't lying, assuming people brush twice daily for a minute each time, just 1 minute. Now, another study suggests that 40% of Americans, so double, waste 8 gallons of water per day, adding up to 1,040,000,000 gallons of water per day in the United States wasted due to leaving the faucet running. Now, you think about that, and you think, I'm just brushing my teeth, no big deal. But when you have 40% of Americans that's doing that admit to that, and we have 330 something million people, or something like that in the United States. So that's over 120 something million Americans. That's a lot of water. That's a lot of water, right? That gets wasted. So turning off the tap while brushing and shaving, this can collectively save nearly 5,700 gallons of water per year for an individual. So not too bad, not a bad thing, allowing that to occur. No, it's actually quite bad, right? And you think about when we have time periods where water levels get low, we go into droughts, and most municipalities draw off of surface water for their resources. And, even the surface water that in the big cities, they recycle it, right? And they get all the contaminants out, all of them, right? Most of that, a great majority of that, evaporates when it sits in the sediment tanks. I don't know if you've ever been to a water treatment plant, but they have these big tanks, and they have these they're like paddles that slowly move around in the tanks. And I'm not sure if they add something like a flocculant there. It's supposed to cling to particles, and then the heavy stuff settles to the bottom, and then they get rid of that and pump off the stuff off the top, and then run it through further treatment and so forth. But some of that is evaporated as well into the air. So water has to continually be replenished. Well, what occurs when the water levels get low? You've had some cities we saw not too long ago. I think they were talking about Lake Mead and how low that was because of the droughts and the ice melt and so forth. They weren't getting the snow melt from the mountains and so forth that fill up the lake. And you have a lot of these big cities that depend on that for a water source, and it was like 100 and something feet low, all right, because there wasn't the necessary amount of water that was going, and their big concern was like, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do when we run out of water? You have to have water to survive. Now, you can get by with a lot less other things, but at the very least, you need water to drink, to cook with, and to bathe with, to keep things sanitary. Okay, and this is why respecting these things, these resources that we have, and teaching your children why it's important to respect the resources at a very young age are very important. So we have there turning off the water while brushing their teeth teaches respect for the environment, which is the number 4 in the 4 categories. And encouraging them to make their bed. Now, it seems like a very simple thing, but, having that as a chore or requirement at the beginning part of the day, they might, complain and whine about it and drag their feet, but it'll start to establish a sense of accomplishment in their minds, right? They got one thing done, one thing knocked off of their list, so it kind of starts to set the mind or the subconscious mind in the pattern of, okay, whatever the next task that comes up, we'll be able to tackle that and knock that out too. Instead of just getting up and leaving the bed just like it was I had to make my bed up in the morning, and I really didn't like having to make my bed up in the morning. So what did I do? I tucked my sheets and blankets super tight, and then I slid in through the top of the sheets and blankets. I wasn't a mover at night, so that in the morning time, I slid out through the top of the blankets, and then I just had to retuck them to make them nice and tight, right? That was my lazy way of not having to make my bed in the morning. But I did keep it made, right? Because that was my parents were trying to instill that value in me at a very young age as well. Let's see. Teachers are encouraging to make his bed. Okay, make his bed or wash his breakfast dishes. Now, William was talking about the dishes thing last time, and he was talking about how important that is. He says if you don't think washing dishes, not just washing dishes, but washing dishes properly, right? It's nothing like going in the drawer and getting out a utensil, and you've got a free meal there, right? Just add water, rehydrate it, and next thing you know, you got a little chili or something to eat, right? Because somebody didn't wash the dish properly and get everything off. They just quick ran it through because they were rushing or didn't really care to, or they don't like washing dishes. But having clean dishes is very important. In fact, I was just looking at a report. Now, Abilene and probably other cities do it too. Ever so often, they put out the health department puts out their like a report card for food establishments within the city. And they give their list of perfect scores, and they list the locations that had perfect scores. And then they have the high to moderate scores. And then they have their bad scores, the failing scores. And then they list the restaurant or whatever establishment it was, whether it's a convenience store food or whatever the case might be. And then they give all the violations as to why they failed or why they got such a low score. And one of the main things that is on there is, cross-contamination from dirty utensils or dishes. It's also sometimes food not kept at the appropriate temperature. Sometimes it's the workers not using gloves or the proper personal protection equipment, right? In certain food establishments, sometimes you got to wear gloves, you got to wear some type of mask, got to have like a hairnet or something like that. And so these are the different things that they're looking at. Now, what is the health department's goal? It's to ensure safety for the public, to ensure that establishment that is serving food to people are operating within the guidelines that are established by the Department of Health, so that consumers who come there can know that they're getting something that's not going to make them sick, whether it's a drink or whether it's a food item. Now, regarding dirty dishes, this is how not instilling this at a very young age to make it valuable in the child's mind, what it can lead up to on a large scale. Each year, approximately 48 million Americans get sick from foodborne illnesses. This is equivalent to about 1 in 6 people in the United States getting sick from contaminated food or beverages. While many foodborne illnesses are caused by pathogens in food during production or processing, notice here, improper cleaning of dishes can also contribute to the problem. And that's what William was talking about last class. Many foodborne illnesses are caused by bacteria, viruses, and parasites, right? Some of the most common pathogens include norovirus. I don't know how many of you are familiar with norovirus. It makes its way through communities ever so often. It's really big in kind of tighter, close-knit communities like nursing homes and schools and things like that. But it's a rager, boy. I tell you what, if you ever get it, it's not a walk in the park. It's a horrible thing to go through. But the pathogens include norovirus, salmonella, many people have heard that one, and Campylobacter. Now, the norovirus, which is interesting, is a common cause of foodborne illness, also known now listen to how they describe this virus from this report in how you can contract it. It says it's a common cause of foodborne illness. Now notice, it's a cause of foodborne illness. It's a cause of it. In other words, norovirus has to come into contact with the food. Okay. Now they say to some degree it might be certain animals or something like that can cause it, but really we'll see here. I don't want to jump ahead of myself, but we'll see where it actually originates from. Also known as a food poisoning. In the United States, it is a highly contagious virus that can cause vomiting, diarrhea, and stomach cramps. So if you get this, it's not just sitting on the commode. You better have a trash can in front of you too, right? That's how bad it can be. Not as bad as, I don't think, as that C. diff. That C. diff is supposed to be really, really, really bad and highly, highly contagious. C. difficile. And a lot of people will get that from antibiotics, which kills off the gut bacteria, and some other ways to get it. But when you get it, it's pretty contagious, so bad that they won't even allow, if the hospital staff are aware of it, they won't even allow someone to go into the bathroom after you. That's how potentially contagious it can be. And people can actually die from it as a result of it, especially if they have a compromised immune system. Foodborne illnesses, including norovirus, affect millions of people annually, with many hospitalizations and even deaths resulting from these infections. Especially when a person's older and their immune system's compromised because of the excessive amount of vomiting and diarrhea. You know, the reason the body does that is because the reason it's able to do that is because it's sucking out water from the cells and from the body. You know, in order to, I don't mean to be graphic, but in order to have the vomiting and the diarrhea, you know, the vomiting is caused from emptying out of the stomach, and the other is caused from the emptying out of the intestines, the bowels. Well, you know, in there it absorbs water and it flushes through really quick. Well, what occurs when you have a severe bout of both of those things and you can't keep water down? You can't even ingest water. Now, not everybody goes to the hospital for these things. They just feel, oh, you know, I'm going to deal with this on my own, right? You know, I can handle it. It's just a little stomach bug, right? But it's not always the case. And you get yourself into a situation where you're severely dehydrated and you're not getting help, which the only thing they can do at that time is give a person fluids intravenously so that their body can rehydrate. Then they're going to start going into organ failure because the body just doesn't have the water and the electrolytes to keep it operating properly. So this is a part of why people die as a result of this. Now it says, understanding norovirus. Norovirus is a group of viruses that can cause inflammation of the stomach and intestines, leading to gastroenteritis. This can be contracted through contaminated food and water, or by contact with infected individuals. The virus is especially common in crowded environments such as schools, nursing homes, and the all-desirous, wonderful cruise ships, right? The cruise ships. Seems like once a week I'm seeing something in the news about something taking place on the cruise ship. You know, people getting tossed all over the place and sliding in vomit, and you know, some type of food poisoning on the ship because the shrimp were, you know, all you can eat shrimp or something like that, you know, and people getting sick. This latest one was one of the slides, water slides on the cruise ship broke and somebody fell out of the water slide. I don't know how severely they got injured, but somebody did get injured, you know. Yeah, I don't think it's that much of a cruise, but people get sick on those things because they're in confined areas, you know. And I know there's different sizes to those ships. Some of those ships can carry upwards of 5,000 people, you know, on those ships, not including the staff. Okay, that's a lot. There are some little towns that aren't that big, And all these people are sitting on a little boat floating in the middle of the ocean, right? I'm guessing they're drinking recycled water. I don't know what type of water they're drinking, but I suppose they have to bring it with them unless they got desalinization things on the ship, which I don't think they do. I think it's like a motorhome. They bring their water with them, but they might. I'm not sure. Now, norovirus. Where does it come from? Now, we heard that it is a foodborne, how did they word it here? It's a common cause of foodborne illness, okay? So, according to this report, norovirus is believed to have originated from, drum roll please, human sources. Human sources, all right? I don't think anybody's going to want any chocolate ice cream after this. Specifically from the feces and vomit of infected individuals. And this is why it is so highly contagious, because the people who treat the people with this who might be suffering from it, they have to be very careful in how they handle it, because they can easily become infected and pass that infection on to someone else if they're not very careful with how they handle it. Now, you can't just leave it laying there, so it does have to be clean, but you have to be extremely careful in how it's handled. And this is why I have a rule, in my home, that anybody who comes in the house from outside, or if you were just in the house, I don't care where you were, before you go in my refrigerator, you better wash your hands, right? Don't just be opening up that refrigerator and going in that fridge, because that's where our food is. And somebody could be not cautious, and they might not think, maybe they had an itch behind them or something like that, and decided to scratch it, and then went in and, grabbed the fruit or something like that, and, I don't want that one. I want this one here. And here comes somebody that walks up behind them, grab that fruit. Next thing you know, they got some type of, it could be that easy, right? And so one way you can cut down on that, you make the rule, wash your hands. Wash your hands before you go into the refrigerator or handle any food, even if it's in the cabinet. Don't go in the cabinet. Don't go in the refrigerator. Don't touch any food or drink without first washing your hands. And, of course, you have to continually remind children, over and over again, did you wash your hands? Oh. Go wash your hands, and clean that off, because these things can be easily transmitted. So it says here, from the feces and vomit of infected individuals. The virus is transmitted through the fecal oral route. Now, to paint a picture for you, that means that poop has to make its way into your mouth. That's how it's primarily transmitted, okay? Now, sure, it could get on the food, which is a cause of foodborne illness, but it's still fecal or oral, because you're going to eat that food, right? So this is why it's important for, like I talked about the Department of Health, when workers don't wash their hands, right? I think I've been, long time ago, I've been in situations where I've been in the bathroom and I've heard somebody. First off, I knew what was going on in there because my eyes were watering. And I hear the toilet flush, and I hear the door open and close. No water running. No water running. So I don't know if it was a washless system, a laser system. They didn't even blow dry their hands or nothing. And I'm thinking, is this an employee? I don't know if this is an employee. I don't know if this was, another customer. But they didn't wash their, I don't care who it was. That's pretty disgusting, right? For people to not, it's not just your hygiene, but it's also caring about other people that you interact with, because people don't think about it, but try to take note for an hour, just personally. Try to take note for an hour of how many things you touch, just in 1 hour. And then also take note in that hour how many times you touch your face. We touch our face a lot in a day, right? And it could be, oh, it's hot out here. Woo. Oh, my nose itches. Oh, what's in my eye? that something in my teeth? Right? We touch our faces a lot during the day, but we're also, touching a lot of other things. So if we're not careful, we can be the cause of bringing things into our bodies, because we're not keeping our hands clean. Well, think about a person who uses the bathroom, doesn't wash their hands when they leave, and then they go back making your Big Mac or your Whopper or your fries. Now, in most restaurants, I don't go to restaurants, but from what I've seen, they're not wearing gloves. Especially fast food restaurants, they're not wearing gloves. So they went from the bathroom, and now here's your fries with a side of chocolate ice cream. Hey, I didn't order that. Just put some ketchup on it. You won't even taste it. And next thing you know, you've got a foodborne illness, a pathogen, and you're retching over the toilet a few days later, and you don't even know why. Right? This is why hygiene is so very important. Now, I don't know. Was that person taught at a very young age the value of respecting themselves and others by maintaining proper hygiene? I don't know. Maybe their parents did teach them. Maybe they just didn't care enough to do it. Possibly they weren't. I don't know. I don't know their history. But this is why it's important. So meaning that it can spread when people touch contaminated surfaces or objects and then touch their mouths. Norovirus can also be found in contaminated water supplies. Again, it's from feces. Shellfish, which we know what shellfish do, right? We know what shellfish, lobster, what's those other things? Scampies, shrimp. You know what they do. You know what their primary food source is? Waste. Right? They're waste. Now, they have a job, and they do a great job. They love their food. They love what they eat. But we're not supposed to eat out of the garbage. We're not supposed to eat the garbage can. Right? And that's what we do when we eat these types of foods that are designed to keep the waters clean. Or foods that are, I don't even like calling them foods, animals, marine life, that are designed to keep the water and the earth clean. When we eat those things, we can take in those same parasites into our bodies that won't hurt them, but it can hurt us. It is thought that the virus may have evolved from a related virus that infected animals, but this, of course, is speculation because they say it's still under investigation. So this is why it's important to make sure they clean their dishes, right? This also teaches respect for his belongings and yours, okay? Now, in the next paragraph, which is where we'll pick up for today, we can teach our children to develop, on page 63, to develop respect by the choices we make in our daily lives. This is why it's so important that we show respect for others and ourselves regardless of the mood or situation. So it's not just teaching the child what they should do, but now it's putting it back on the parent. How are we conducting ourselves? How are we acting, regardless of our mood or our situation? In fact, when you think about that regardless of the mood or situation, we have to be consistent. On page 41 of the self-control unit here, we talk about emotions. This is chapter 2. Emotions, and it says it's all in the way you respond. So we had we talked about how emotions in this chapter can really build you up or they can wear you down, but ultimately it's all in the way you respond. And at the very top it says it doesn't matter if your emotions are positive, negative, or mixed. What matters is how you respond to all of these emotions. Keep in mind that emotions strongly influence how we conduct ourselves. And so this is why in the parenting manual, we're emphasizing the fact that it's important that we show respect for others and ourselves regardless of our mood or our emotions. Emotions can change at the drop of the hat. This is why we can't rely on emotions to make our decisions. They are very powerful influences that, like we just read here, strongly influence how we conduct ourselves, but in between that emotion and the action, or in between the emotion and the word, we have the opportunity to stop and think. Before you do anything, you have that blank space right there, that demilitarized zone, if you were to put it that way, before you cause war with your mouth. Stop and think, is what I'm getting ready to say or do, is it beneficial or is it harmful? What are the short-term and the long-term effects? Am I being a positive example or a role model to my child right now? Or I'm just going to you know what? Forget it. This just needs to be said. This just needs to be done. They need to learn sometimes you got to handle your business, right? And yeah, we have that space in between the thought, the feeling, and the action. Okay, now the thought comes, the feeling comes, but the action, you can govern that. You can govern your thoughts too. But the action, that's going to really show what's in your heart or what your character is made of. Now, although emotions can occur almost instantaneously, we have the ability to consider how you should respond. You have the ability to consider how you should respond to what you feel before you take action. So that's that little space in between the feeling and the action, or the mood that you might be in. And why you're in the bad mood? I'm not in the bad mood. Well, you can see it all over your face. You got a frown on your face. You're walking around, you're kicking things, you're slamming drawers on the silverware drawer, you're slamming doors, you're slamming the refrigerator. What do you mean you're not in it? That's not showing respect for our belongings. Oh, well, I don't want to go to school today. I don't want to cut the grass. Okay, well, that might be what the child, that might be what the parent's saying. I don't know. But we have to be very mindful in taking time in between that space to choose an action or a word that will demonstrate positive character. And then at the bottom here, it says, applying self-control to any emotion, whether it's fear, joy, excitement, or anger, is an important aspect of developing character. Acting on emotions without careful consideration is called acting impulsively. Impulsive actions occur when you allow emotions to cloud your ability to think rationally. And to think rationally means to think sensibly and wisely, having gathered enough facts to make intelligent choices. All right, now it's from the Self-Control Unit, Chapter 2, page 41. All right, so continuing here on page 63 in the Parenting Manual, we should never intentionally, now notice there, we know that when it comes to respect, there's 4 categories of it: intentional, unintentional, real, and imagined. And if we're very, very careful and we're really putting into practice to the best of our ability and being diligent and consistent in being mindful and guarding our thoughts, like we just got finished reading here, and considering our emotions and considering how we're going to respond, we could really almost eliminate unintentional disrespect, right? Now, you can't control how someone takes what you say or do, but at least coming from you, right, you're being very mindful not to do anything even to unintentionally disrespect someone. But notice here, we should never intentionally, and some people do this, some people will actually do things to try to get under a person's skin or to push their buttons. We should not choose to disrespect others, property, the environment, or even ourselves. I'm not hurting anybody, it's just me. No, you are hurting yourself. Because if a person chooses not to respect themselves, that means they have acknowledged that they have little to no value in their minds. So if they have very little value for themselves in their minds, then they subject themselves to any negative influence. Because what does it matter? Who cares? Well, of course, lots of people care. And they should care for themselves. They should respect themselves. But again, this is something that as a parent and as teachers teaching parents, we might have to reset the bar for them, because they might have, you remember chapter 2 of the character unit, they might have been a part of creating a dysfunctional family. Now they've got to hit a reset and start to reestablish or establish in the child's mind that they do have value and that the parent does value them as their child. There is never, now notice here, never a legitimate time when it is acceptable to be disrespectful. Well, he deserved it, or she deserved it. They showed disrespect to me, so I showed disrespect to them. No, there's never a legitimate. This word legitimate means conforming to the law or rules. Conforming to the laws or rules. So there is never a time, if you're conforming to the laws or rules, where it is okay to be disrespectful, or where it is acceptable to be disrespectful. Now remember what we covered in the character unit, and I believe in the self-control unit. What rules? What are rules? Morality, morals. Morals are rules, principles, right? And we're talking about rules that govern proper behavior. So if you were to look at this, there is never a time if you're practicing the peaceful solution where it is acceptable for a practitioner of the peaceful solution to be disrespectful. Legitimate also means justify or make lawful. So you can't just change it, right? Because you feel the need to. Even anger. Now we talked about anger quite a bit. Anger does not give us the right to disrespect others. Again, this word right is moral or legal. See, we got moral again in here. Moral or legal entitlement to have or obtain something or to act in a certain way. So anger does not give you the legal entitlement according to the principles or the morals that we've been learning here in the Peaceful Solution. Go through any of the books and find in the Peaceful Solution where you're given in those rules the right, the legal entitlement, because of anger, to show disrespect to someone else. Not going to find it. Guarantee you. Guarantee you. Now, respect. The ability to show care. This is the last paragraph on page 63. The ability to show care and concern for ourselves, the well-being of others, possessions, and the environment should be unconditional. Unconditional. In other words, without conditions, without any terms set. In other words, you do this, and I'll show you respect. Like the old saying, I'll show you respect when you show me respect. Or I'll be kind to you when you're kind to me. No, it should be unconditional. Everyone deserves respect. One of the most erroneous beliefs of our time is that respect must be earned. And this is a belief that holds true. Even when we were going into many other schools, that was one of the things that we would ask when we were talking about the lesson on respect, or bringing some aspect of respect into the lesson, which easily could be incorporated. And that was one of the concepts, the beliefs, even amongst the teachers, right? And even I think William he brought it out one time in one of the schools we went through. They had these pictures, these posters on the walls, and it said, you have to give respect in order to get respect. And, children are going through, throughout the wall, throughout the school, throughout the halls, throughout the day, and they're seeing these things, and these are influences like billboards, influences going into their mind. Now, what occurs when they feel that their teacher is not respecting them? You haven't earned my respect. You haven't earned my respect, so teacher, I'm not going to respect you. Respect must be earned. I just saw it in the hallway there. You haven't earned my respect, so get out of my face. I don't want to learn history today. You should be history. That it doesn't work, right? The concept, the basic concept of respect, foundation of respect, is everyone deserves respect. Because if we're going to wait until someone earns our respect, we'll be waiting from here to, as they say, kingdom come. We're going to be waiting for a long time, because everybody has a different perception of what respect is. This is why we need one standard to go by, one set of guidelines and rules. Like in certain industries, there's industry standards, and you can have different manufacturers, and they'll make a particular product, but it has to be according to that industry standard, so it's usable in any application where that product is designed to be used. Otherwise, everybody says, well, my product is best when it's made like this, or it has 3 holes, or 2x4 should actually be 5 inches by 10 inches. That should be a 2x4, and you go buy wood at different places, and now your wood looks all wonkily and, looks like some troll built it or something like that, because everybody's got different standards. Well, it's the same thing with morality. If we can all agree on these moral principles, then we can all get along and we can all have a common ground on which to base respect and to show it. So it should be unconditional. One of the most erroneous beliefs of our time is that respect must be earned. The truth is, respect should be automatic, for even a stranger deserves respect. These are the concepts of respect that we need to teach our children through our daily choices. Now, automatic, it should be, right? It should be automatic. Initially, when you're learning these concepts, particularly on respect, which is what we're talking about, it's going to be a manual at first. It's going to be manual, right? Like you're driving a manual transmission. That's how transmissions were to begin with. They were all manual, whether it was 4 on the floor, 3 on the tree, 5 speed, 6 speed, 8 speeds, whatever they got now. That's how you shifted through the gears. And, if you were blessed, it was nice to learn that skill. Most people nowadays, they have no idea how to drive a manual transmission. They get in the car and they're like, oh my word, what is this thing poking out of the floor? And I can't drive this thing. I see an R, but where's the D at? And with a manual transmission, it's not just a matter of throwing the gears into, what they say, grind it until you find it. It's not just a matter of throwing gears into different positions. There's kind of a finesse of driving a manual transmission and finessing your accelerator with the release of your clutch, whether you're going by feel or you're looking at the RPMs or whatever the case might be. It's always fun stopping on an incline and having to, with a red light and having to go up the hill, you got to get it just right. But you shift gears based on how it feels and the RPMs and the speed that you're in, and if you're turning the corner and if you have to accelerate, and you have to do a lot of thinking, but eventually it becomes automatic in your driving of a manual over a period of time. You don't really have to think about it that much. And then you get an automatic, and all of a sudden all you got to do is just put it down into D, and then you can just step on the accelerator or go. Well, it's the same thing when learning this concept of respect. You have to think about it, right? You have to think about how to apply it in this situation. How do I respond in dealing with this person? What should I say? What should I do? And then eventually you're in 5th gear and you're overdrive and everything's smooth. But eventually, over a period of time, doing it over and over again, this is how skills are developed. It's through practice. You can't develop a skill just by reading a book. You can't develop the skill of respect by reading a book and just agreeing with it. You can learn about it, but respect is developed for yourself, others, property, and the environment through practice. But over a period of time, once that skill is developed, then it becomes automatic. It becomes a part of you. It becomes a part of your character. It becomes a habit where you don't have to think about it anymore. It's not what you do, but it is who you are. So it's incorporated into your design or your programming as to how you respond. And this is what we want to get the children, and they're very young, and they're at a very young age in dealing with the parents and setting this up in the minds of the children. At a very young age where their minds are plastic and formidable, we want them to value these concepts right now, because if it's continued to be mirrored or role modeled and reiterated throughout their adolescence into adulthood, it'll become a part of them, and they'll value it, and they'll practice it and actually teach it to others as well. So we're going to stop right there on page 63, and we'll pick up with the IQ here on page 64 when we come back next class. And our next class is going to be this upcoming Wednesday. That's going to be August 13th at 5:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Look forward to seeing you. Thank you all for coming, and have a wonderful evening.